What's up everybody, it's B-Ballin again, and I am here to talk about the results of the playoff bubble races before the main event starts on Friday, just to recap what went on during Sunday and Monday's games. So, spoiler alert, and I'll go over a bit of metagame analysis as well as a topic that has been brought up by a lot of players in interviews, and I just want to discuss that a bit further. So, going over the playoff races, as you know, Saturday was the end of the group stages, then we had some tiebreaker matches. Newbie and LGD moved on to the tiebreakers so they could get the chance to play in the main event. In the first matchup on Sunday, Liquid vs LGD, the loser, unfortunately for them, was eliminated despite not being in the tiebreakers, and LGD managed to convincingly stomp Liquid 2-0. So, what went wrong for Liquid? They definitely drafted a bit more conservatively than they're used to. They are known for playing a bit of an aggressive team. And I think Liquid got a bit predictable. They drafted TC Razor and Viper, and they just those are very common TC heroes. They put so much emphasis on Koikwa to have a good start. He played Naga and Templar Assassin. LG countered with some very strong picks, as they managed to end the game before Naga truly got online in one of them, and in the other game they picked up Doom to counter the TA. And furthermore, I think Liquid sort of abandoned a strong team fighting offlane for Demon, or aka Pegasus, as usually Liquid like to pick up Tidehunter or Void. In these matches, Demon was given Brewmaster, which is a strong hero, but I feel like Brewmaster doesn't have the same impact as a hero like Tidehunter can, and Brewmaster is a little bit less versatile in his lanes, as Tidehunter can be put in pretty much any lane besides mid. Meanwhile, Brewmaster is sort of forced mid or safe lane, not really forced to go aggressive child lane. And I feel like Tidehunter's overall AoE impact along with his burst is a bit more favorable to Liquid's playstyle, as well as better versus LGD, since Liquid do not want to look for long drawn out fights against LGD, and unfortunately that's what they were given. So, a bit unfortunate for Liquid. They couldn't pick up the get in, get out, faceless avoid, or the go in with Tidehunter, immediately kill one, get a 4v5, and then just crush teams from there. So LGD managed to beat Liquid, moved on to face Cloud9, and I thought LGD would beat Liquid because I thought LGD's playstyle, which is just group up in 5-man, would be a bit too much for Liquid's early game aggression to just controlling the map in the later game to overcome. Because if Liquid didn't get off to a good start, then Liquid's style of winning the early game, then just controlling the map and starving out the other team would not come into effect. And per usual, as for all the Liquid losses, when they lose, they get crushed, and they got crushed in both of those matches. So, it was a 2-0, despite what the spoilers say. Meanwhile, it was Cloud9 vs LGD. Cloud9 managed to win 2-1. Now, this match I thought would be a 50-50, but Cloud9 is a very, very tricky team to deal with. I think they're one of the best teams in terms of counteracting 5-man death ball pushes, which LGD like to do, as they like to split push. They know... I think Cloud9 are one of the best teams in terms of moving around the map, as they just move very fluidly. They get Meepo. In one of the matches, they just split push, forcing LG to stop from their death ball, otherwise they'd lose way too much in terms of economic resources, and with a hero like Meepo, who can just take a tower, then immediately get back in base as long as he has one Meepo in the base, then it's just very difficult for LG to just group up. But LG managed to take one game, and in the end, this match really didn't matter too much, as LG did lose, but they still get the opportunity to play in the losers bracket, and Cloud9 moved on to face DK for a chance to go on to the winners bracket. And DK, after a very, very tough game one, facing against a Cloud9 Meepo and an Eternal Envy Invoker, where Envy brought a Divine Rapier, DK used the power of... did they have Ice Faceless Void? I'm not too sure, but they had a very, very rough start for Mushi, but in the end, Burning's Naga Siren and DK constantly pushing out the lanes made it so difficult for Cloud9 to actually leave their base, even though Cloud9 had a pretty solid teamfight edge in a lot of those fights. And Lanham's Enigma played magnificently, managed to counteract a lot of abilities, managed to overcome the Refresher Doom by AUI, and DK won in a long fashion. And in Game 2, DK crushed Cloud9 in an 11-minute match. They managed to pick up an Undying, which I love. The unfortunate thing about Undying is that past the 15-minute mark, he really, really falls off precipitously. But in this matchup, Cloud9 didn't really have any answers to deal with the Undying, and DK just managed to roll over Cloud9 in a very convincing fashion. But this match doesn't really affect Cloud9 too much. They're still in the main event. They moved on to the losers bracket, where DK managed to secure a place in the upper bracket. Now Monday is the day I really want to talk about, as that was a really, really intense day. So Titan versus Newbie, I did think Newbie had a slight advantage going on, but this will lead into a discussion I will talk about very, very soon. As Newbie took game 1 on the dire side, Titan managed to take game 2 despite Newbie taking Iraqs. Titan, with their really, really strong team fights, managed to come back from the deficit Newbie put them in and took a very, very surprising game 2. And in game 3, Newbie did a level 1 Rosh strat, which it was on Titan to scout it. I mean, if you get away with the level 1 Rosh strat, then you sort of deserve the right. Unfortunately for Titan, even if they did scout out, I think Newbie's 5-man at level 1 on the Rosh pit with the Treants tanking the Rosh ends so that Newbie wasn't even low in terms of HP would have been enough to drive Titan away. So just a really good game plan by Titan, or a really good game plan by Newbie, and Newbie just snowballed out of control. KYXY's Nagasiren could never get online or never really get enough farm. I think all the outer towers are claimed by the 12 or 13 minute mark, and Titan, despite a wombo combo team fight, were just too far behind. So that wasn't really what I wanted to talk about the level 1 Rosh. It was just really well designed by Newbie. They knew everything was on the line. They decided to put it on the gamble, and Titan probably should have known better to scout it out, as there was a Furion, there was a Luna, there was I think like a Dragonite and a Shadow Shaman or heroes of that nature, so Newbie had a really strong death ball. But when there's a Furion and a Luna, you should probably scout the Rosh, and Titan didn't. But even then, I don't know if Titan could have contested the Rosh. So the next match was Newbie versus Navi, and Newbie dominated Navi in both of the matches. Game 1 was a bit closer, but Newbie just managed to 5-man death ball with Tidehunter, and Tidehunter was a reoccurring theme for Newbie, as he, being played by Jalite, was just able to overcome so much, managed to switch up a lot of team fights. And there was another factor that I'll talk about very soon after I'm just done discussing these playoff ball races. So Tidehunter by Navi. Navi can stop the death ball in game 1, and in game 2, the Wisp Tiny could not get enough done against Mu in the Templar Assassin. Mu on the Templar Assassin actually managed to get a ridiculous streak. And I thought Navi's draft was also a bit predictable. They picked up a Boast Razor in both games, and they picked up a Wisp in both games as well. So I do think Wisp is a bit overrated, and the Chinese teams showed that, hey, last year was last year. We didn't know how to play against Wisp last year. We know how to play against Wisp this year. So let's try to do something about it. Even though Vici did lose to Fnatic in ESL 1 when they gave Fnatic Wisp both times, I don't know if Navi practiced the Wisp combination as much, as they have definitely a different playstyle compared to Fnatic. So Newbie managed to crush Navi, and in the third matchup, Newbie versus IG, I actually favored Newbie a bit because the Chinese teams, I'm not the biggest believers in terms of momentum, except when it comes to mindsets, but I think teams very experienced and teams who practice as much as Newbie and IG, momentum don't really matter too much. Or momentum does not matter too much. I spoke like Luminous a bit there. The fatigue, you could tell in some of the games were affecting Newbie, as one thing I do like about the TI bubble races is that the team who is in the lower position constantly has to keep up. They're not really given too much time to rest between series, and I think a lot of tournaments sort of give teams too much time to rest and actually negate the losers bracket disadvantage. So shout out to TI for constantly putting the pressure on the losers bracket matchup, giving them less chances to rest. They had a small time to rest, but not really compared to, in some of these tournaments we'll just give the loser bracket team a day to recover, so that they are actually pretty much nullified, since the winners bracket is never given a 1-game advantage or a set advantage in the grand finals match. So I'm going to have to actually check on the final bracket to see if the losers finals and the grand finals are played on the same day. If they are, then I can sort of understand that. If they aren't, then what's the point of even having like a winners bracket advantage? There actually is 0 point in having a winners bracket advantage, so we'll see how that goes. But Newbie managed to beat IG in game 1 with some strong 5-man and just snowballing very early on. IG managed to beat Newbie in game 2 with some snowballing and a very strong game plan early on. In game 3, it was a bit more contested. Newbie made a lot of mistakes, but their early game was so strong that they managed to get the most out of their greedy lineup in their late game, even though IG took much better team fights than Newbie. Xiao whiffed so many Chronospheres. His Chronospheres were really off the ball in that matchup, but IG ultimately couldn't deal with the Emperor Spirit because he got to such a strong start, and another factor was that Newbie had to take a lot of Roshans, so IG couldn't beat that, and Newbie did move on. I did bet on Newbie on that, and I managed to get rewarded for that quite a bit. I think overall in this TI, I'm like 50-50 completely in overall bets. I might check that a little bit. I can check that. Let's see, Dota 2 Lounge. So you can see that my betting profile is quite bad because I always usually bet on the underdogs because that's what makes betting fun. But in TI, I think I bet on teams that are most likely to win, and 50-50 pretty much. Yeah, it's actually 50-50. All these matches, I usually bet on the underdog because those are more fun. So, Newbie get to move on to the uppers bracket. Vici were just like, alright, let's fight Newbie instead of DK, because I think that was actually a smart choice by Vici. I think DK, since they actually scrim against Vici is one of the only Chinese teams that scrim against DK because of a variety of reasons you can read on Reddit, for some drama or not drama, whatever you feel like. But I think Vici chose the right team to go up against. I think Newbie 5-ban a bit too much, and Vici with their early game aggression can manage to overcome Vici's death ball. And we're going to see a rematch of the second to last match of the group stages, DK versus EG in the winners bracket. I think DK are slightly favored because they have a bit more versatile of a draft, but EG, they're just so good at playing from behind. They're so good at playing from ahead. It's very tough. I think DK will have to recognize the necessity of banning out Enigma for Zai, especially on the Dire side. And the topic I want to talk about was the Dire side. Now, I honestly can't really recall too much of day one. I think the better team won in all of the matches in this bracket. But in day two, the Dire side only lost once, and that was in IG versus Newbie. And Newbie actually won on the Radiant side, and that was the one match that Dire did not lose, or did lose. So let's talk about Dire versus Radiant for a second. Now, EG in particular have said, if you give us Dire, we won't lose, because they know how to exploit Roshan, they know how to exploit the Dire off lane, and they know how to recognize that, okay, you know, we can get a jungler, play a bit more greedy since we'll have the Roshan badge in the late game. And actually, there was a post by Mason on, I think, NA Dota, who said the Dire safe lane is even better because there's a little less avenues of initiation for the Radiant to initiate onto. If the Dire safe lane carry just plays safe, the Dire safe lane carry can also pull and not be exposed, since the Radiant long safe lane is a bit more exposed, and there's actually some decent paths for the Dire heroes to actually go in and gank the Radiant safe lane carry. Now, I don't think that really mattered too much, but I want to talk about the Radiant versus Dire lane offlane advantage, and how that's not even a factor. So, you hear a lot of times casters like Sinrin, and I think Sinrin's actually the best caster. He's my favorite caster in general. But the Radiant offlane has a significant edge because they can pull the big camp, and they can actually get more experience, more levels, since the creep wave is closer to the Radiant tower. And that's true, but teams recognize that, and they pick up strong Dire offlane heroes, and the hero that we see most often is the Tidehunter. And the Tidehunter is so strong on the Dire side because he can stack and farm Ancients, not super early on, but just manages to get enough experience to get by, and teams are actually going for the Max Anchor, Max Craggy build, or Max Kraken build, so that Tidehunter just needs a couple levels, and that's so difficult to harass him back. He can, even if he doesn't manage to get too much farm, he'll manage to get enough experience where he can get enough points in the Anchor Smash, where he can farm the Dire Ancient stack so very fast. So, it's hard to harass the Tidehunter, and you might say, alright, if you're playing against a Dire, just ban out Tidehunter. Well, the problem is there's so many other heroes you have to ban out against the Dire side. You have to ban out the Lycan for sure, because the Lycan advantage. You might have to ban out the Enigma, because the Enigma can rush very early. If you're a team against Alliance or something like that, you have to ban out the Nature's Prophet. Templar Assassin is a strong consideration as well. I feel like there's just so many heroes you have to take into account against the Dire with the first round of bans that it's just too much for the Radiant in a lot of situations. Now, I don't think Titan is as strong a team against Newbie, but they managed to win game 2 because they're on the Dire side, since they managed to hold their own in the early game. They did lose a bit in the mid game against the newbie Death Ball, but using the Dire advantage in the last game, even though Raiden had map control, all Titan had to do was win one fight and then translate that into a Dire advantage Roshan fight with the newbie ultimates on cooldown, because teams do not want to engage against the Dire on the Roshan since there's just so many avenues where the Dire can initiate, especially with a hero like Batrider or Darkseer or heroes of that nature. And Titan actually had a Batrider in the game too, and Batrider really changed the scope of the game. Earthshaker was also on the Titan side, and those heroes are very strong in Roshan engagements. Batrider can immediately isolate, and it's really hard for, once Batrider initiates onto somebody with the high ground advantage on the Dire side, then it's really difficult for the teammates of Newbie to actually reinitiate, since they have to cross into high ground unless they have a strong blink initiator of their own. And if that Batrider has a BKB, well, count that hero out of the fight completely, whichever hero gets lassoed in. Furthermore, Dire can Roshan very early on, and I feel like this puts a lot of pressure. Now, I think we saw it a bit more in this match. I do think Newbie had stronger drafts than Navi overall, and I think Navi, even though they're known for adapting well, they're very stubborn. In all of TI3 matches, they like to pick the Radiant side, and they actually played very well on the Radiant. They managed to exploit the offlane Radiant advantage before teams could really get the strong Dire offlanes, and before the Dire offlanes were buffed to a ridiculous degree, like Tidehunter, etc., etc. So Navi managed to use that in TI3, but this is TI4. A complete different meta has happened, where you have to take into account, alright, Tidehunter will manage to get his ancient stacks, and we're going to lose Roshan control unless we manage to beat them down very early on. So teams have adapted. They know, okay, we're Dire side. The Radiant are going to have to make a lot of things happen in the early game so that they can actually gain control of Roshan by pushing down some of our early towers. And even then, unless you manage to get like a tier 2 mid, or both of the tier 1s mid and bottom, then we still have Roshan control. We still manage to get that in the palm of our hands, and we can manage to come back from a lot of situations despite being slightly down. So now I have to get very far down or have to pick a team fight lineup which can constantly fight, and I think Newbie recognized that in the matchup, as in the group stages, Navi picked up a lineup that could constantly fight, whereas Newbie picked up a lineup that could only fight based on cooldowns like Ravage, and Navi could not recover despite beating Newbie in the group stages. Now, this is good strategy by Newbie, and fault by Navi, because in game 1, how the picks and orders go is that I think the teams alternate between choosing first pick or side, and I guess Navi prioritized getting first pick in one game and getting Radiant side in the other game. They have to recognize times have changed. You can't just give away Dire and let heroes like Shadow Shaman, Enigma, Tidehunter through, but there's just no choice. You're going to have to let one of these heroes through, and in Game 2, Navi banned out the Shadow Shaman because Chinese know how to exploit Shadow Shaman better than any other team, especially on the Dire side. They just know how to get the levels on Shadow Shaman, go for a very nice timing push, and then get some map control, take Roshan off the wards, and then it's just so hard to come back for the Radiant side. So it's a fault of Navi, good execution by Newbie, and I think that matchup really illustrated how strong the Dire side advantage was. Now, I mean, not really so much in Game 2 because Navi were just like getting crushed in all the lanes, but I think Tidehunter was another pickup for the Dire offlane, and Tidehunter got enough experience. Razor and Earthshaker cannot do enough to drive off the Tidehunter, especially if he has Kraken Shell and Anchor Smash, where he can just reduce your damage output by such a tremendous degree that it's just difficult to zone Tidehunter out of experience, even out of farm, because Anchor Smash and Tidehunter has higher than average base move speed, so it's difficult for them to zone him out, and then he just goes to Ancients, catches up in farm, and then you get the Ravage online, you win a team fight, etc., and eventually you snowball from there. Now in the third matchup, Newbie won on the Radiant side with a very strong early game, and IG won on the Dire side in Game 2 with a strong early game, and if Radiant don't win pretty hard in the early game, I feel like Dire have such a strong advantage unless the lineup is constructed in a way that can just brutalize team fights, even if you lose the early game. And when you do that, you're sort of leaving yourself open. Alright, we're going to pick these strong team fight ultimates, but there's going to be a cooldown, and during that point, the Dire can just counter push and just expand their map control despite the early game advantage or despite the team fight advantage of the Radiant side. So that's a big problem. EG is such a strong team, but they have acknowledged when they get Dire, they are just so much more confident. They actually have a 100% win rate on Dire, and against this competition, having a 100% win rate on one side, I think EG is definitely top 3 team in this international with Vici and DK, I think, and they mentioned had winners bracket berth confirmed, so top 2. But the level of competition is so high that if one team is a 100% win rate on a side, there might be a bit of a problem. So I think the Dire side are currently too strong, especially with certain heroes like Shadow Shaman, Tidehunter, and shouts to the Chinese teams for exploiting this. Nobody is really seeing near as much Shadow Shaman until the Chinese really just showed how strong he is, especially on the Dire side. And Tidehunter off lane. Hey, you gotta ban Lycan against the Dire. You might have to consider banning the Enigma against the Dire. Shadow Shaman as well could be a possibility. So where are you gonna ban Tidehunter? And if you ban out Tidehunter, well, good luck. You get Barrett, who can just go into the enemy jungle and still manage to get some good experience and catch up with the neutral camps. So Dire, I think, is too strong in a competition like this, where the teams are so evenly matched that if one team doesn't snowball super early on in the early game, then the Dire side will just manage to overcome, unless the lineups are constructed in a way where the Radiant can win in certain situations. So that's a bit of my rant gone. I think Dire are too strong, and I think that will play into a factor in Friday's matches. So we'll just take a look at this. It's going to be EG versus DK. Now, I think DK are one of the teams that can sort of draft around it. I don't know if they'll ban around it. So look for EG to win on the Dire side since they have a 100% win rate. So I think game 1 will be very important, and not just the coin flip to see who gets first pick and who gets first side. That might just decide the matchup, and that's not what should happen in Dota. But DK have a very strong, versatile drafting side. They have some very individually skilled players, but PPD is just such an amazing captain, such an amazing drafter that if he's given Dire side, it's going to be very, very difficult to beat him. You know, Vici versus Newbie, Vici have shown that they don't really care about sides. They just like to play all out early aggressive, and we'll see if Newbie can sort of recover, as Newbie has shown they're very strong in best of 3 styles. That's another bit of a factor. Best of 1s are just iffy for the group stages, especially in a tournament as big. And if you're going to knock out a lot of teams with best of 1s, I mean, of course you can say I'm biased because I like teams like Alliance, Fnatic, Empire, teams like that. But if you're going to knock out so many teams, then you'd like them to have a bit more opportunity, especially with the prize pool this significant. But it's a Valve's tournament, they can do whatever they want. So this is a coin flip matchup despite Vici starting in the upper bracket matchup, because Newbie have shown they're very strong in best of 3s, they can adapt, and this might come down to a Rain vs Dire event as well. You know, Saturday's matches, which is the losers bracket, IG should have a significant edge. I think they're just more skilled than LGD, and skill is the defining factor regardless, but when teams are evenly matched up, then you get the sides and the draft taking into account, or being taken into account. Cloud versus Navi, I think this matchup is relatively evenly matched. I don't know if Puppy's draft has been super strong. I don't know if Navi have really adapted to the meta, but Navi managed to beat Cloud9 in their group stage match. But Cloud9 are one of the Western teams who can exploit Dire, and I think the Chinese as well as EG are the teams that know how to exploit Dire advantage more than any other team. I don't know if the Europeans really understand that factor as much. So this might come down to skill. It's going to come down to Puppy's drafts. If they're weak, if they give Havos continuously Razor and Cloud9 just know how to exploit that. Havos is a very strong Razor, but there's only so much you can do with Razor unless you just overwhelm teams, especially on the Rain side. If you're a Razor on the Dire side and you get off to a good start, then you can always have that security blanket of Roshan coming into effect, and you can pick up team fight lineups that fight around Roshan much better. So this is a 50-50. If I had to bet, I'd bet on Navi just with their experience and with hopefully Puppy drafting much better than he has been, and with an even count on the Rain and Dire side in terms of games for games 1 and 2. So the loser of upper bracket 1, I think Navi would face DK or EG or Cloud9. Navi would face DK or EG should one of them lose. and IG would face Vici or Newbie. I think that's how it is. Let me just check Reddit. Bracket has been set. That's not helpful. Bracket. Whatever. So who do I think is going to win? I think DK have a very solid shot. I mean, the picks don't really matter. It's just, I think a bit more of the sides. Tidehunter and the Dire has a much stronger win rate than Tidehunter, and Shadow Shaman and the Dire is just very strong. And Earthshaker, Enigma, those heroes are just very strong as well. So that's a bit of my rant, but I do think the overall more versatile team, which I do think are DK and EG, who I think will face in the grand finals, despite Vici playing so well. Vici have shown a style that is difficult to deal with, but I think can be figured out by strong drafters like PPD, as well as Lanham or Burning or Mushi, who is drafting. Now it's Lanham, but before it was Burning and Mushi. So I think it will be a grand finals between DK and EG. That's a 50-50 matchup, but I do think that DK will be able to triumph on the back of more versatile, more creative drafts. Let me just see. Winners upper bracket 2. Yep, so the winner's bracket is once again not given any edge. In the last TIs, the winner's bracket edge was given because the loser's bracket had to play more on the same day. But I really hate that the winner's bracket are not given any edge. I feel like that just is just like, what's the point of staying in the winner's bracket? You're only allowed to lose in the grand finals. You're only allowed to lose once. So I hate that personally, but I guess it's more interesting from a spectator's point of view. I just don't think it's fair. So a bit more of a ranty piece this time, as hopefully you sort of understand where I'm coming from, as it might be a bit more exciting for spectators, but I do feel like there's some problems in tournament format, despite there being so many exciting games, and there's some problem with the sides when teams are evenly matched and when one team doesn't snowball out of control. So hopefully you enjoyed that video. Sorry it went on a bit long, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.